happy Tuesday. I hope it's a great one for you. And I hope you can make it even better. Glad you're with me today. Come on into my little world for a moment. Let's share a thought or two. Came across something in looking at events that took place on this date in history. I like to look and see if something spectacular happened on the day and maybe wasn't noted in our history books so much, but something small. And there were a lot of things that happened, maybe things that didn't mount up to great things that made the headlines, but maybe they were the stair steps that brought us to the greater events, such as Apollo 11 beginning to orbit the moon. If they hadn't been able to orbit the moon, would Neil Armstrong ever have stepped on the moon and spoken about small step for man, giant leap for mankind? You know what I mean. It's the little things that build up to the big ones. But I came across something that struck my attention under the name of Johannes Kepler. You may have heard the name Kepler before, but you may not pay much attention to it. But you know, he came about in a time in the early 1600s. In the early 1600s, growing out of the darkened ages of the past, where science was extremely limited, and where a study of the world around us, especially the universe around us, was very limited. There were some things that stood out, and we're beginning to realize that we were on a planet that was sitting out in space. There are questions that still linger in mind and wonder, how in the world can the universe operate in the way that it does? How can planets and stars and moons and other such things that take place throughout the galaxies and throughout the universe do what they do? You mean our planet is not hanging on a string or sitting on a pole? It's there, held in place by the laws of physics that govern the universe, some of them that are almost beyond comprehension. And it was Johannes Kepler who, in his study of our world, the planets, the stars round about us, took us from astrology to astronomy, recognizing that the forces of physics that control not only our planet, but so many others, are what keep it in its orbits, not just round, but elliptical orbits, as it rotates on its own axis, invisible as it is, and then orbits around its own star, its own sun, keeping distances a certain way, passing through its seasons, tilting in a certain direction. As it appears, the sun moves up and down. No longer did we see the sky as a blanket cast over us with little lights attached to it, and the earth being the center of the universe. No longer do we consider that we were something sitting on the back of a great turtle. No longer did we even necessarily see the world as flat. It's amazing that people like Kepler were able to do what they do against the scoffers, belittlers of the time, to study things and write them down, things that we still recognize and use today. Small steps, it might seem. While we look at it, and what he studied becomes a part of the basis of our understanding of the world around us, the universe, and the physics that operate it and keep it going. Of course, when I look at it, I recognize, how in the world did something like this come to be? And there are scientists that study and think, the eons of time that are immeasurable are out there. I look at it as a greater mind that brings it all to be. I don't begin to understand or comprehend what brings it about. I love the science that studies it for what it is and how it moves and measures and records all of these things and predicts the things that are ahead. We've learned a lot. Even in the astrology times, we learned how the things in our universe affect us and how they affect our times. Even Jesus spoke about study of the weather in his time. He spoke in Matthew 16 in the early part of the chapter, verse 2 in particular, when it is evening you say, it will be fair weather, the sky is red. He goes on in the next verse to talk about, if you get up in the morning and the sky is red, he says it's going to be foul weather. But we're always looking in it for something to govern our lives, and that's not what Kepler or others were doing. Kepler was pointing out there are laws that govern us. There are laws that work around us. That's what science studies, and I appreciate the values of science and what it brings our way. To think that we have all the answers would be kind of arrogant on our part to think in that direction. No, we don't have the answers. We barely even know all the questions. Oh, or part of the questions, not nearly all. So what I'm thinking about on a day like today, when we look at the world around us, when we look at the things we think we understand, when we study the laws, the physics, the environment around us, and we think we've got it all figured out, there's probably going to be a Johannes Kepler who's going to come out and say, I tell you what, here's how I think it works. Let's study it some more. As far as I can see, it's going to be generation after generation seeking to gain understanding. Perhaps in times to come, they'll look back at our time and say, we were in the dark, not the dark ages. We just didn't have the answers that they've got then. The way that we look at our times past and think, we've got answers that they didn't have then. It's amazing the way things progress. That's why I think there's a greater mind at work, more than just a flow of time and development on its own. There's a greater mind at work in these things. And that's what Jesus was trying to say. Look around you and see what's happening. Understand the greater beauty of what is there. See the day for what it is, but recognize it's just one step in the great progression of things round about us. Thank you, Johannes Kepler, for studying those things, for branching out, for taking us beyond the mysticism of astrology into a world of physics and reality. Thank you, Lord, for recognizing that we have something bigger and larger than even we measure in the world round about us. To see the greater, the bigger picture, the one of the great mind, the mind of God who set it all into motion. That's where I think Kepler and others help us look if we're willing to see. Yet, you see a red sky in the morning, you got an idea it might be a rough day. Or you watch the beautiful sunset of evening as the sky turns crimson and say, fair weather ahead. It's good to know. At the same time, remember we are very small in our understanding in a great creation of a universe that's round about us. Enjoy the day. Be thankful for it. And let's see what tomorrow brings as well. Thanks for being with me today, and I hope you have a marvelous, marvelous day. And we'll talk some more down the road.